section C, that is the contemporary world. And the first chapter of the contemporary starts with the First World War. The First World War began in 1914 and ended in 1918. It engulfed almost the whole world. It was fought on the wide scale on the land, sea and in air. About 86 nations took part in this war. Because of the unprecedented extent of its spread, impact and its total nature, it was called the World War, or we can say the First World War. When we talk about the First World War, there has to be various causes for the war, because wars just do not start all of a sudden. So always the causes are always termed into two portions, that is the long-term causes and the immediate cause. So firstly we would discuss about the long-term causes. In the long-term causes, the first point that we will discuss about is the division of Europe. Now, Europe was divided into two hostile camps in the 20th century, and the major European nations were divided into two blocks. For example, Britain, France and Russia had formed the triple entity in 1907. Earlier than that, Germany, Austria, Hungary and Italy had formed a triple alliance in 1882. They had made treaties of mutual help to each other in case of war with the opponents. So the tension prevailed in their relations with each other. Clockwise, in the word of Professor Fay, the system of secret alliances made it inevitable that if war did come, it would involve all the great powers of Europe. And the secret diplomacy gave rise to feeling of mutual suspicion, distrust and hatred. The second point is nationalism and mutual rivalry. In the 19th century, there was an error of militant nationalism, patriotism, love for one's own nation meant hatred towards the other nations. So each nation thought about her own nation's interest. Nationalism had become competitive and aggressive, taking the shape of Calvinism. Germany had Kaiser William II as her new emperor. He wanted to establish a vast German empire. France and Germany were old rivals. After defeating France in the Franco-Prussian War in 1870-71, Germany had ceased to provide of Alsace and parts of Lorraine, which were rich in minerals and industrial products. The French dreamed of taking revenge and taking back their lost provinces. Thirdly, we come to the point of militarism and armament race. Now, every country, since they started to feel that they were rivals for each other and their personal interests were clashing with each other, eventually all the nations started to increase their military power. More and more youths were employed in the army. Every country had lakhs and lakhs of military men. Military trainings were made compulsory for every youth above the age of 18. And not only that, many industries were set up and a trend had come into being that every country was preparing or manufacturing arms, every kind of arms, guns, tanks, fighter planes, submarines, bullets. Eventually, what were these armaments made for? Obviously, they would be used somewhere, sometime or the other against their opponents. So, the increasing of militarism and the manufacturing of arms and ammunition by every country gave a reason and a blow for World War II. Next point is clash of imperialists' interests and colonial rivalries. Children, by the 19th century, many of the European countries had formed their colonies in Asia and Africa. So, Asia and Africa had been occupied by Britain, France, Spain, Holland, Portugal, and Belgium. These colonies provided new markets, raw materials, increased manpower for national armies, and missionaries to preach the gospel. But in due courses of time, Germany surpassed other European nations in industrial production. She wanted to share in the world market. It became necessary for Germany to have her own colonies. This brought her into a direct clash with the existing colonial powers like Britain, France, and others. This created a warlike situation. In 1904, Britain and France made a secret agreement in which Britain would have political control over Egypt and France over Morocco. But the French claim over Morocco was opposed by Germany, which declared that all the nations had equal opportunities to trade with. The plan of Germany to construct a railway line from Berlin to Baghdad created a fear in the minds of British, France, and Russia. Italy's ambitious plan in Africa and Ottoman Empire also alarmed the big powers. Russia's expansion plan to Ottoman Empire clashed with the interests of Britain, Germany, and Austria. Japan, which had become an imperialist power, had ambition in the Far East and was on the way to fulfill them. Thus, the rivalry over the colonies became a major cause of the World War. Next was the Balkan issue. The most serious source of nationalist tension in Europe after 1871 was that of the Balkans. A large part of Balkans was under the control of the Ottoman Empire, which started disintegrating in the 19th century. One by one, its European subjects' nationalism broke away from its control and declared themselves independent. Balkans became the scene of big power rivalry among the big powers. Each power, Russia, Germany, England, Austria-Hungary, was keen on countering the hold of other powers over the Balkans and extending its own control over the area. This led to a series of wars in the region and finally the First World War. Yes. The next point is the negative role of the press. Now what happens? The newspapers and the medias poisons people's opinion by presenting view in such a manner so as to increase their sales, means they wanted to increase their TRP. So they started, giving hostile propaganda, creating an atmosphere of doubt, distrust, tension, which empowered harmful to the world peace. And this was done by them because people wanted to know what is happening around the world. So they wanted to read more and more newspapers, and newspapers were sold in a large quantity. So press also played a very important role, you can say rather, in spreading news among the masses that world war is going to take over. Next was absence of an effective international machinery. Now when I talk about a national machinery, I mean to say something like the UNO. Like today we have the United Nations organizations. During or before the First World War, there was no such organization. Every country was free and they acted in the manner they and their leaders wanted to. So, whenever two countries fought amongst each other, there was nobody to stop them, nobody to interfere, and if any country interfered, it was for their own personal benefits. So this was also a big cause that no international machinery was there to stop any two countries fighting from each other. Because after the First World War, a League of Nations was formed during the Second World War time. But yet the League of Nations could not stop wars. Thereafter the Second World War, when things went very, very bad, then the United Nations organizations was formed. Eventually, so during this time before the First World War, there was no international organization. Now, the immediate causes. The immediate causes is the Sarajevo incident. In June 1914, the Archduke Franz Ferdinand, who was the apparent heir to the throne of Austria, went on an official visit to Sarajevo, that is the capital of Bosnia. There, on June 28, 1914, he and his wife were shot dead. The assassin, Gavrilo Princip, was a 19-year-old Bosnian. This dual murder had been planned in Serbia by a secret society of patriotic terrorists called the Black Hand. The Austrians blamed the Serbians for the crime, as the assassin and the fellow conspirators had received their guns and bombs in the Serbian capital with the help of Serbian officials. Presuming this is to be true, Austria made an 11 demand and sent stiff ultimatum to Serbia on the 23rd of July. Whereas Russia, it asked Bosnia not to give any kind of report or hand over terrorists to Austria. So, when Serbia refused to comply with some of the above conditions, especially those that would have led to loss of her sovereignty, Austria declared a war on Serbia on July 28, 1914. So finally, the war begins. When Serbia refused to give any kind of information or to hand over any terrorist to Austria, Austria felt annoyed, and on the 28th of July 1914, Austria attacked Serbia. Upon this, Russia warned Austria and mobilized her troops. Thereupon, Germany declared war on Russia on the 1st of August 1914, and thereafter on France on the 3rd of August 1914. Next day, Britain declared war upon Germany. When the German army invaded Belgium, whose